Welcome to another installation of Trash OP Meh. It's the series where we talk about units and lords and heroes and characters and all these things that are perpetually either terrible, perpetually strong, or perpetually kind of middling. Like, not terrible, not great, just not seen a lot, especially in multiplayer. And first up on the OP list is going to be gyrocopters. Now, I know it's trash OP and we're starting with OP, but that's because trash and meh I put in the same replay for convenience, but that means we start with OP. Gyrocopters are overpowered. Why? They're relatively cheap at 800 gold. They have 100 armor, 100 speed, 12 models, and teeny tiny little models that bob up and down. Now, there's a lot of problems with gyrocopters, but they do have high damage potential, and one of the main problems is archers, even armor-piercing archers, can have significant issues hitting these guys, because a lot of the arrows go right past them, as you can see. There are gray blurs occasionally. They just go right past our gyrocopters, not taking significant damage. Now, the one thing that is doing well is handgunners, straight line shots. But why this demonstration is happening this way, we have the huntsmen, crossbowmen, handgunners, and basic archers. And what I was trying to show here, and still am working on showing, is flying units generally are countered by range units. Generally, because melee units on the ground literally can't interact with flying units at all, so most flying units are significantly weak to ranged. But with the gyrocopters' very high armor, high speed, allowing them to dodge most shots that aren't straight line shot like handgunners, and did I say high armor? High armor, high speed, and then decent HP pools with a small model. Range units all of a sudden don't counter them that well. The only range units that can counter them are 360 shooting cav that can get directly underneath them and fire straight up, or straight line armor piercing shots. Which for the Empire, which has handgunners, is fine. But gyrocopters also have bombs they can use on ranged units, taking out even the mighty handgunners. If I hadn't just sit and let you see that the handgunners can do decent damage to one of the gyros, you can just do that, where you instantly bomb and kill them. Or, I believe I throw this one into melee soon, with 12 models, decent melee attack, 29 melee attack for some reason, 30 base, and then a weapon strength of 50. Like, honestly, these guys can jump onto poor archers like crossbowmen and just kind of beat them into a bloody pace. As we can see, they're in melee and they're going to take very little damage compared to the crossbowmen they're murdering right now. And like, again, you might be like, well, yeah, it's a helicopter versus a guy with a crossbow. What do you want? Cool, but then why is your helicopter priced like a guy with a bow? Huntsmen are only 150 gold cheaper than a gyrocopter. Like, there's a lot of inconsistencies here where it's like, it's a freaking helicopter that's impossible to kill, does a ton of damage, is crazy fast and all this stuff, but then it's priced like a chump. It's super cheap. I don't know. This is priced like a Nuln Ironside, and it's way faster and just way better in every way. So anyway, the focused final conclusion on the gyrocopters is theoretically ranged skirmish flying units are countered by ground-based ranged units, and gyrocopters just aren't. They're fast enough to dodge most of their missiles. You need straight shot armor piercing, which not a lot of factions have, and even if you have straight shot armor piercing, they can just tank one volley, get above you, drop their bombs, and then shoot you from directly above, and you're going to shatter like these handgunners did. And failing all that, they can just dive your backline like dog units and kill your crossbowmen or whatever in melee. They're countered by very few things, and for a very cheap price point of only 800 gold, it's incredibly cheap and efficient to use them. Like, who cares if you lost one? That's less than a Savage Orc Biggin. Again, that's something like you need to keep in mind, is the cost of the unit I'm talking about. It's like, even if you kill one, it's like you killed a Savage Orc Biggin, congratulations, Burning Head achieved the same thing, and it would kill like 2 Savage Orc Biggins while they're fighting in melee. The gyrocopter requires so much investment from you to kill. Well, it didn't cost the dwarves very much at all. So anyway, how to make these things not perpetually OP? Well, after the DLC and reworks the dwarves got, these things just got more and more oppressive, but they have been meta since Warhammer 2, honestly. Gyrocopters made the Warriors of Chaos matchup impossible. And there's a part of me that could go on a rant about Creative Assembly, please stop making flying skirmish units. They're just not well designed in this video game. Like, there are so many factions that don't have significant air force pressure, or they don't have ranged armor piercing straight shot units to deal with these things. So there's a lot of factions that just auto lose the gyrocopters. So delete the unit. Okay, cool. Very good feedback on how to make this unit appropriate. All right, you got me there. So how do I make the gyrocopters that are currently in the game not overpowered consistently? They shouldn't be able to land, period. Then that takes away their capacity to be like a flying dog unit. And there are already units in the game that can't land, like the war balloons. If you insist on making them land, if you insist, I would give them like 6 melee attack and a weapon strength of like 10. Like, I don't know why, if you really want them to be able to chase stuff that's routing by just going into melee with it or whatever, I don't see why this shit has 30 melee attack. I don't see why it has a weapon strength of 50. That seems pretty insane. And if you're like, well, they're ramming a helicopter into a guy, cool, but then also wouldn't the helicopter probably crash? So you can make them like bloated corpses, I guess, which I'm not suggesting. I'm just countering the theoretical argument of, well, if I crash my helicopter into a guy, he'll die. Okay, but you're probably not ever taking off again. So I don't know what we're doing. Anyway, so aside from making them bloated corpses, I really don't think they should have any... I don't think they should be able to participate in melee at all. And if they do, they should suck at it. Okay? I also would make them significantly squishier. Whatever 4,000 divided by 12 is, I'm going to roughly go with 300. It's close. 300 HP per model is not high, but it's higher than it should be. Look at these things. Look at them. They can't take a shot. If anything goes down, like, it's such a tiny little flyer that if any of the propellers stop moving, it's going to catastrophically fail and go flying off into the distance, like, or crash into the ground. So they should probably honestly get like 200 HP a model, maybe 150. And then they have high armor, but if you do get hits on them, it'll do significant damage. So I think that's the easiest way to fix gyrocopters, is just a combination of those two things. So the final result is, like the war balloon, like the sky junk, they cannot land, period. And reduce their health by about 1/3, maybe 1/2, but I would go with 1/3. I honestly think even with those changes, gyrocopters would still be meta. I don't think they would be OP, but I think you would still see them in a lot of dwarf matchups because the pressure of flying skirmished is just too good to pass up. But they're currently too good. They're currently way too good for their cost. So those would be my suggestions. My real suggestion would be, please, for the love of God, stop designing flying skirmish units. Please. It's not well thought out. Does not belong in this video game. Oh, God. All right, moving on. So next up, you're going to be confused because you see 2 trash units on the greenskin side. So you're like, okay, well then he must be talking about the high elf side. So is the meh unit the Phoenix Guard and the trash unit the Sun Dragon? And what are the archers for? No. Okay, the trash unit is the Feral Wyvern. The meh unit is the Mangler Squigs. And again, the Mangler Squigs are currently trash. The reason they ended up in the meh category is I wanted to talk about them in this series. They did have a lot to say about the Mangler Squigs, but they went from being on release the most broken, overpowered, disgusting thing anyone has ever seen, and then CA hotfix nerfed them into one of the worst units in the entire game. And when the series is something that's perpetually overpowered or perpetually trash, they're perpetually neither, because there's been one change to them and it took them from number 1 to number last. So I put them in meh because that's the middle. Mangler Squigs are weird, and we'll get to them next, but just in case you were like, why are Mangler Squigs here? So for the trash unit, the Feral Wyvern. Feral Wyvern's been trash forever, and then CA finally allowed people to just take it in multiplayer, which is great. I'm not against free units, but it is pretty garbage. At a 1,300 gold price point, it's significantly more expensive than a Manticore, but it's weaker than a lot of things. It has all of the weaknesses of a dragon, like a Sun Dragon, without any of the fun stuff. It does not get a breath attack. So taking a look, Sun Dragon has more HP, more armor, same leadership at the moment, less speed, way higher melee defense, and then similar charge bonus, similar everything. But I don't know. Dragons aren't actually that powerful of melee combatants. They're okay, but they're not that powerful. They're not really about that. It's mostly about getting the use out of their breath attacks. Like, nobody likes to use a dragon and just throw it into melee and then it instantly dies and you're like, wow, that unit was middling. So the wyvern is just that. It's like, okay, you have a pretty terrible melee combatant like a dragon, but you get none of the benefits like the, you know, breath attacks. And people try and justify it by saying it has poison and high speed, but the low melee defense means it gets shellacked if it lands in basic spears ever, or even basic melee units of any kind. Even non-spears get a lot of damage on the Feral Wyvern. And it's kind of a duelist, but lacks anti-large or anti-infantry. And it's not a cheap terror piece like a Manticore where you can only fire it and forget. It's 1,300 gold, whereas the Sun Dragon I think is 1,600, and Sun Dragon has the 3 breath attacks we mentioned, and it's kind of kicking the Feral Wyvern's ass. So it's like, as a duelist, you're not very good. You have no supportive capacity. You're crazy expensive, and you're feral, so you do rampage out of your owner's control for a little bit. It's just got significant issues. So how to fix the Feral Wyvern would be probably 2 things. Now, I say people have misinterpreted this series by saying I can't change the cost at all. No, I'm not saying that. The only thing is I can't just say, yeah, just make it cheaper. Okay, done, because that's boring. I would make it cheaper, yes, and I would give it pretty significant buffs to its dueling. And for its dueling, I would just give it higher melee attack, period, because I kind of want the Feral Wyvern to be good at monster hunting and infantry hunting, but it's all about single entities. So I think to achieve that, they're already on the right track with low armor and low melee defense. Means you don't want to throw this thing into a pile of anything, because low melee defense and low armor means even like Empire Knights can get some decent damage back onto it. But I think if you ramp up its melee attack, meaning if it lands on a target, it's going to hit it, but it has horrible crowd clearing, so you're not worried about it just murdering everything. So with like legitimately 70 melee attack, and then reduce its price point down from 1,300 to 1,000, I think that's enough. It doesn't have the highest damage, but its damage is high enough, so then this thing could be kind of this like falcon, right? Falcon or a hawk or an eagle, right? It's this thing that's lurking above the battlefield, and if your infantry or horse or monster lord gets isolated all on their own, this thing just dives in, gets a bunch of damage out, and with its high speed and poison, no one's getting away from it, and then you have to bring resources over to fight it. But then it's not overpowered, because with its low melee defense and armor, whatever you bring over to help is going to trade cost effectively into the wyvern. And then honestly, with its rampage, it's probably just going to rampage itself to its own death. But with the lowered price point, 1,000 gold is not nothing, but it also makes it easier to make calculated trades with the Feral Wyvern, whereas currently it's pretty spendy to lose a 1,300 gold unit. So I think those 2 combinations could make it an interesting little assassin type unit, without breaking the bank for the greenskin. So I think that would be a good way to fix the Feral Wyvern. Higher melee attack, lower price, and just turn into an assassin. Moving on to the meh units, some Mangler Squigs. Mangler Squigs are monstrous infantry meant to kill infantry, but then they also explode when they die, and they're unbreakable. Okay. They're crazy weak to ranged fire. So when they're overpowered, they were weak to ranged fire, and that was it. Anything they murdered in melee. They could kill single entities instantaneously. They could kill cavalry, and then when they... Honestly, if cavalry even did damage back to them, like the Fireborn or something, explosions would just murder the entire unit. And then they also murdered infantry in melee, and when they blew up, they killed infantry. So now, you can see 2 volleys from 2 archers, so 4 archer volleys has almost killed this entire unit. And then they dive into the Phoenix Guard. They're going to get some explosions out. And the explosions have since been nerfed to not do that much damage, honestly. So that was a Mangler Squig. It's 950 gold, if I remember correctly, which is pretty expensive. And in campaign, they're next to useless because either you don't get their explosion at all, meaning they're a half-assed, terrible, monstrous infantry unit, or you get their explosions and then they die and you lost an entire unit. Which, I mean, that's the nature of a bloated corpse type unit, sure, but then why is the bloated corpse function of it not doing that much damage? Well, when it was overpowered, the bloated corpse function did a lot of damage, but then it was too strong because you have an unbreakable, fast, 6,000 HP bloated corpse flying through you. The Mangler Squig suffers from, I hate to just be the negative guy, but horrible unit design. It was like, all right, we want it to be unbreakable, fast, tons of damage versus everything, and then when you kill it, it also does damage on its way out, and it's like, who is that fun for? That was terrible. Why would you do that? So they need to pick a lane. Either it's a bloated corpse, in which case it's fast and just tries to sprint at something and explode, but then you need the bloated corpse weaknesses. It needs to be truly squishy, not like kind of squishy. Like the archers probably need to be able to kill models in 2 volleys, not 4, because I had 2 archers firing twice, and then they didn't even kill models, they just got it crazy low. Because you don't just want a hypersonic cruise missile flying at your front line and instantly getting explosions off no matter what you do. That's kind of not fun either. Or they can keep it as it currently is with the explosion. The explosions are a mild nuisance, but not really a big deal. But then this unit needs to do significantly more damage. I would go with the second one, personally. Leave the explosions as they are in their nerfed state, but just have this unit do more damage. And here I just have the Phoenix Guard get into melee with them. The Mangler Squigs are beautifully animated, and they cause a lot of knockback, but they don't actually cause that much damage. We can see the Phoenix Guard really aren't taking that much damage. And the Mangler Squigs didn't charge because I have the AI on Sandbox Fair. What I would do is give Mangler Squigs a special thing. You know the Ogre passive, the Ogre charge or whatever, where they get to they ignore half of an enemy's charge defense or whatever, and they get half their charge bonus anyway. I would give Mangler Squigs a special ability where they just ignore charge defense altogether, and then they knock people around like this. That could make them interesting as like a halberd line breaker or a box breaker with their crazy animations and stuff, and their explosions do decent-ish damage against halberds, as we can see here. That would still make them very weak to ranged fire. That would still make them pretty bad against cavalry, as they currently are, and pretty terrible against single entities, but it could help. So if we're going that route, they're still terrible. So I don't think just negating charge defense is going to be enough to take them out of terrible and put them into viable. And I know this is the meh section, but again, they went from overpowered to terrible in one patch. So, okay, they can ignore charge defense due to their crazy flinging squigs around thing. And then I would give them higher melee defense. Not high melee defense, but higher. Maybe like, because they're at 22 right now, I'd give them like 35 melee defense. Yeah, so 35 melee defense would make them okay versus cavalry-ish, kind of, sort of. Like low-tier, non-anti-large cavalry would do okay versus them, I guess. But even if the cavalry got the charge on them, I mean, 35 melee defense and no armor is not going to help you too much. But that would help them survive a little bit versus those cav units. Help them survive a little bit versus cheap spears and whatever, and keep them really weak to ranged. And still not make them crazy versus cavalry. So yeah, I think that's what we would do. So yeah, give them the immune to charge defense and charge reflection, raise their melee defense a little bit, and then keep everything else the same about them, and then you have this weird line breaker unit. With that, you can maybe take them down to 900 or 850 gold instead of 950, but it's a tricky unit to balance because it's kind of, its in theory proposal is a little unhinged, so it's very hard to balance anyway. I mean, we've been through it a billion times. I'm just rambling at this point, so yeah, that's what I do to fix these 3 units. Hopefully you found some enjoyment. Goodbye. Roar. Subscribe, yes.